Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Friday flood media update for Scott County. My name is Dave Donovan. I am the Emergency Management Director for Scott County here in Davenport, Iowa. Also speaking today, we have Rich Kinney from the National Weather Service, Decker Plain, City of Bettendorf, Administrator. You got a new job, right? Yeah. Brandon Wright, who is the CFO and Assistant City Administrator for the City of Davenport. Several other people in the room, Mayor Bob Gallagher, City of Bettendorf, Tony Kenobi, who's the Scott County Board Chair, as well as partners from the Salvation Army and other folks in the room that we've been working with. With that, I will cover more of a regional outlook and our efforts regionally. We'll have some comments from each one of the two bigger cities in our county. We're going to start with Rich Kinney with an update on the weather as well as the outlook for the river.
All right, thank you, Dave. I'm Rich Kinney, Warning Coordination Meteorologist at the National Weather Service in the Quad Cities. And first we'll start off with a brief weather forecast here and then kind of jump in as far as how that's going to affect the weather. Maybe a few light spotty showers today, little or no rainfall accumulation, so nothing to be concerned about there. Then we're looking at dry conditions as we head tonight through the day on Sunday. So that's good news. Unfortunately, late Sunday, next week into potentially Thursday, we're looking at a pretty active weather pattern that potentially could be quite wet with daily rounds of showers and storms. Still a lot of uncertainty in our rainfall amounts that we could expect and the timing and placement of those. Potentially, we're looking at through that entire period, maybe 1 to 3 inch amounts. At the higher end of that range, potential for around 4 inches. So now transitioning into the river forecast here at the Quad Cities at the Rock Island Gauge. Of course, as you know, the preliminary record crest yesterday evening, 22.70 feet, and I understand the Corps of Engineers is kind of out today looking to confirm and verify that new record. Latest stage, 22.5 feet at 12:30 this afternoon. In terms of the forecast and how it relates to the river forecast, the most likely scenario right now we're looking at is kind of those widespread 1 to 3 inch rainfall amounts with a renewed rise looking at later next week, but a new crest below this most recent crest. That is our most likely scenario we're looking at right now. Of course, if we're talking some of the more extreme rainfall amounts, we get up more into the 4 inch range, we cannot take the scenario completely off the table right now that we would have an even higher new crest here in the Quad Cities than we experienced recently. So we can't completely rule that out, although that is a low probability scenario at this time. So that's essentially what we're looking at for the weather forecast and the river forecast.
And as we did with our earlier media briefings, if we can hold all the questions till the end, we'll answer to the best of our ability everything that you ask. So with that, again, regional status report, just in general terms, critical infrastructure items, power remains on for virtually all areas of Scott County. There are individual properties that are impacted by flooding that may have power off at this point. From a safety standpoint, those are evaluated on an individual property by property basis. Water, Iowa American Water is our water provider for most of Scott County, certainly all of Davenport, all of Bettendorf, many other communities. They remain in full production. They partnered with the Corps of Engineers some 8 years ago and completed a substantial mitigation project which provides them flood protection well beyond, several feet beyond any crest that we would ever expect to see. They do have gates in that flood protection, and those gates are part of the system. Those gates are closed to prevent water incursion. They do have they have a little bit of seepage from stormwater drain that they have successfully mitigated with a small pump to pump those waters out, and they have sandbags in place at those gates, which is part of their normal flood protection effort. Sewer, Davenport Wastewater Treatment Plant is the regional provider, providing wastewater services for all of Davenport, all of Bettendorf, the cities of Riverdale and Panorama Park further to the north. That plant remains in production. We continue to monitor the situation there. With subsequent higher crests, we may become concerned, but currently it is stable, it is operational, and we continue to treat water at this time. Berms, temporary walls, we continue to monitor several locations, both within the city of Davenport as well as within other communities in Scott County. Right now, our flood protection measures are holding. We continue to monitor that. We have persons monitoring that 24/7 throughout the area, both within the city of Davenport as well as other communities, the cities of Princeton, the city of Riverdale, city of LeClaire, the city of Buffalo. Buffalo has experienced a fairly robust flood fight. They continue to battle that, but we believe that we have the resources in place, both from the state as well as other partners that are assisting them in their efforts. And we want to thank many of our neighboring communities for their generosity in providing filled sandbags for their flood fight in the city of Buffalo. And on behalf of Mayor Doug Anderson, he would like to extend his thanks to everyone that's been assisting them. So we continue the fight. We are hopeful for the waters to recede. We, again, thank the National Weather Service for all their advice and support throughout all of this. We're hopeful that as the waters do rise again, we're expecting that, we're planning for that. We hope that they aren't as high as the crest we experienced earlier this week. But for us, more troubling is the duration. We believe that that's what's caused many of our problems, is the fact that we've been underwater for some 40 plus days at this point. So Governor Reynolds has been in town earlier today. I believe that she may be concluding a tour at the wastewater plant right now. She did tour the portions of east downtown Davenport that were impacted by the breach that occurred earlier in the week. She also toured and spoke with several business owners and property owners in the west end of Davenport, as well as touring the Garden Addition, where we have a berm that we're watchful. Accompanying her was Representative Dave Loebsack and his assistant, as well as other state officials. Joyce Flynn, Director of Iowa Homeland Security, several officials from Iowa Homeland Security accompanying us on that tour, as well as staffers for Senator Joni Ernst and Senator Chuck Grassley. Senators Grassley and Ernst both plan to visit, and we're working to schedule those visits right now. Also with that contingent earlier today was a representative from the Federal Emergency Management Agency. The Federal Emergency Management Agency, along with officials from Iowa Homeland Security, are evaluating the situation right now, and we're hopeful that they will grant us a federal declaration so that we can begin to bring federal resources into the area, not so much for response, but for recovery, as we can begin to get ourselves back on our feet and begin to move forward. So with that, I will turn it over to Brandon Wright from the City of Davenport, who will give you an update on the efforts within the city.
Thank you, Dave. Just a couple of quick updates. He stole many of the things that I was going to say. Certainly today we want to thank Governor Reynolds and the federal and state delegation who was out here taking a look at all of the areas of Davenport, understanding the flooding that's going on, having an opportunity to talk with some of the businesses. It was great to have them here and to see their support for what's going on here in the Quad Cities and particularly here in Davenport. Just a couple of items of where it is that the City of Davenport continues to focus its efforts. Obviously, we continue to watch and closely monitor the temporary flood walls that we have in place in the East Village, also in the downtown area, and then also on the west side. We have staff continuously monitoring those walls. One question that we get frequently over and over again is, do we think that any of those are going to fail? At this point, we've been monitoring all of them. We don't anticipate that any of them having any problems. They continue to act as they should, and we're grateful for that. And we are certainly thankful for all the businesses and residents in those areas whose lives we know are disrupted by our comings and goings in that area, but we continue to monitor those walls and make sure that the areas are remaining safe. The water pollution control plant continues to be the area that we're most closely monitoring, just because of its relationship to the area and what would happen if we need to close that gate. We don't anticipate that needing to happen until we would get over 23 feet. And at this point in the forecast, as the National Weather Service was indicating, the river is coming up, but we don't see it going quite that high, and we are hopeful that it won't. If it does, we have contingencies in place where we would begin kind of closing down some of the portions of the plant in order to save some of the property there and make sure that ultimately when this flood recedes, that the water pollution control plant can continue to function as it should for this region. The downtown area, if you've driven through the downtown area recently, you know that there's a lot of street closures going on. We just ask for everyone's patience in obeying the detour signs that are marked and the road closed signs. As you drive through that area, just please be mindful of those signs. Take a look online. You go to cityofdavenportiowa.com. You can see all the detours. We keep that updated on an hourly basis, so you can go ahead and see what streets are being closed in the downtown. Also, looking forward to next week, as the National Weather Service has indicated, there is the potential for that water to come back up. And so if you're a business or a resident in the area who has used flood protection measures on your own property, we would encourage you to leave that in place. Looking forward to next week, even if the water starts to go down a little bit, because if it comes back up, we want to make sure that your property doesn't need to be reset with those protective measures. And last, while there are many businesses in the downtown certainly that are closed, there are also many that are still open. We would just ask for the community support and continuing to frequent and to support those businesses that are open in the downtown, but also returning to those businesses once they open again. We are looking forward to the time when the water goes down and all the business can get back to usual here in the city of Davenport. Thank you.
Overall messages for the community: be safe, be aware. There are numerous areas where there is floodwater that's easily accessible. We're discouraging persons from entering that floodwater. If it is necessary for you to enter the floodwater, we encourage you, implore you to take protective measures. Use hip waders, boots to keep out of those floodwaters. Avoid coming into contact with those floodwaters at all costs. Per our health department, there have been numerous inquiries regarding tetanus shots. Contact with floodwater is not a need for a tetanus shot. If you're injured while you're exposed to floodwater, please seek immediate professional attention, as there may be antibiotics or other courses that your medical professional may recommend. If you are forced to work in or around floodwater, we encourage you to practice very good hygiene, washing your hands frequently, again, using personal protective equipment. Simple cloth gloves are not good enough. Please use nitrile gloves inside of those. Use protective equipment to avoid at all costs coming into contact with that floodwater. There are a lot of microorganisms and other things in there that are not good for human bodies, for your body to absorb. So we do encourage you to stay out of those floodwaters. We do have a contact number. We have consolidated our call center. We now have one number. That number is 563-484-3086. That number can be utilized by residents needing assistance. In other words, volunteers who may come to your residence to assist you, moving personal items out of harm's way, helping you with flood protective measures. That same number can also be used by persons wishing to volunteer. We have had great outpouring of support, and we do have several hundred names in the queue already. Thus far, most of those resources have been placed into the Buffalo area to assist them with their sandbagging efforts. But we do need volunteers. We will continue those efforts. Our Quad City Community Organizations Active in Disasters, or COAD, has been mobilized. They will continue to assist us with our volunteer management efforts, as well as our donations management efforts. The Salvation Army, one of our COAD partners, continues to take donations at the Mississippi Valley Fairgrounds through 4 p.m. today. There is a list of donated items that we are accepting at this time. Please do not attempt to donate items other than those on that list. At this time, those become troublesome for us. Look for more information to come on that either later today or over the weekend as to what our strategy will be moving forward. We are looking for other facilities so that we do have events coming up at the fairgrounds, so we're going to need to find an alternative location and an alternative strategy. We do thank our partners at the Salvation Army for assisting us thus far. Beyond that, we do have a long-term recovery committee that's part of our COAD as well. That committee has begun to meet. They've begun to look at strategies for fundraising, for flood relief, and other efforts that they can undertake to begin that process. The sooner we get into recovery mode, the sooner we can get back to recovery, and the sooner we can move forward. So Decker Plains here also to speak about the impacts to the city of Bettendorf.
Thanks, Dave. Afternoon, everybody. We currently have about 4,000 filled sandbags on hand and ready for distribution. We've got about 7 trucks fully loaded to take anywhere that we need to take them. We did take some bags this morning to Buffalo. We take them to the city of Davenport if we need, and we take care of our needs as well. Today we had about 60 volunteers from Pleasant Valley High School filling bags with us today, and there were Chick-fil-A, Grinders, and Happy Joe's. So we'll announce to you the next time that we have sandbagging operations, so you can help yourself. We got about 6 semi-loads of additional sand today. We're probably not going to do sandbagging over the weekend. We've taken care of all of our needs unless something comes up that we need to deal with. We have currently 14 pumps, sanitary sewer pumps, placed throughout the downtown area, and they're pumping 24/7. We've got crews that take care of those. We think we're removing from the system about 24 million gallons a day in doing that. The top half of the flood wall at Leach Park has been raised. We're protected now to 28 feet. The 28,000-pound gate has been installed at Leach Park, and the railroad track gate at 10th Street has been closed and sealed, and we have a temporary dike at 8th Street, and despite some rumors on social media, we do not have problems at that dike. We're manning that 24/7 with the CP rail assisting us. We have 8 3-inch pumps there and 1 8-inch pump there that are handling everything there. So we're very confident that 8th Street dike is not an issue. I think people got a little panicked yesterday. We sent some firefighters and police officers down there as part of their physical training and gave them an opportunity to beef up a little bit. So I think people got a little afraid that something was going on, but everything's good there. We've got a couple other places where we have sandbag walls that we man as well. The trail, the Riverfront Trail, is open until you get to 8th Street, and then you have to turn around and go back. So the Riverfront Trail is open from 8th Street back to 42nd Street and all the way up to just about Pigeon Creek Park. I think Harbor Drive is probably the strongest residential area we're protecting, about 50 homes up there. We've placed about 45,000 sandbags with those residents up there. They call us when they need it. They're pretty self-sufficient. They've lived on the river a long time. So we deliver bags to them, and they're taking them to their residences in flat-bottom boats with jet skis, and they man themselves. So, but we provide all that, as is Riverbend Road. So with that, I don't think you have any more information, and we'll wait for questions.
Any questions? Yes? It's a little preliminary for that at this point. Until the water recedes, it's going to be really difficult to assess, especially in residential structures. We do have information we forwarded to the state of Iowa and to FEMA, but those are based on inundation maps and assessed valuations at this point. We do know that we have reports in the city of LeClaire of 2 homes with structural damage, likely caused by weakening of a foundation wall. We don't know the full extent of that. Those homes are unoccupied at this point, awaiting the water to recede so that we can investigate further to determine the extents of those. But until we get in and get some architects or some professional folks in there to take a look at those homes, we're not really going to know. We know that we have a fairly high number countywide of impacted homes and those that might have as much as minor damage on the FEMA scale, which is, you know, water on the first floor up to about 2 feet. So we know we have those homes. We have homes where we have had breaches in the city of Buffalo with the same condition that have been overcome, and at least 1 or 2 businesses in the city of Buffalo. I think you're going to find there are sporadic pockets of that all throughout. And then there, of course, are our river homes in southwest Davenport, areas of unincorporated Scott County between Bettendorf and LeClaire, north of LeClaire between LeClaire and Princeton. That's what they do. You know, they either plan for it and protect for it, or in many cases the home might be raised and they let the river flow through it, and it's built in such a way so that it's easily recoverable. Yeah, it's public information. I mean, it's our tax rolls, it's our assessed values, and it's a map that shows at certain river levels where the water would flow if we didn't put flood protection in place. So they're going to be of limited usefulness because it's not reflective of where we've protected. So if you visit the city of Princeton, for example, they have a low system of flood barriers all along their front street there that are protecting those homes. So those homes show that they're, on these maps, show that they're impacted when in fact they're not. Yes? Sir. Okay. Absolutely. Yes, we'll do. Oh. Yes, the question is about the one-stop shop, which we refer to as the MARC, or the Multi-Agency Resource Center. We do not have a location for that yet. That's a little bit premature, but the idea with the MARC is that you bring all of those social service organizations, all of those relief organizations into one place. If we get that presidential declaration, FEMA would be there as well, potentially as well as the Small Business Administration, and it'd be one place for residents to go where they can apply for assistance and find out about resources that might be available for them. Are you the question is about a regional disaster center, I think you called it. I think you maybe. So it's our emergency operations center. Yes. So that is a place where we gather to discuss options. We also, the primary mission of it is to get resources for our efforts. So that area has a very strong logistics section, and they're reaching out, trying to find those resources that we can bring into the community, especially during flood fight. That room will also then transition into recovery as we begin to look at those resources that are coming into the community. It is at my office in North Davenport. I think our ongoing challenge remains the amount of time that we've been underwater. I think that what you're finding is that our flood protection, whether it's temporary or permanent, is very soft, and we continue to monitor that. So, and then I think, you know, again, any future crests become problematic, even if they don't rise to the level that we got earlier this week, the 22.7. If they approach that with our wet conditions, that's our biggest challenge. We have begun planning for recovery, but until we get some water out of here and can dry out and begin to assess, it's very difficult to move that very far forward. So I think that's our challenge right now. Yes.
When it comes to the flooding in downtown Davenport, obviously measures were taken to prevent it getting to this extent, including the HEPA barriers. But do you think there's anything the city could have done differently that could have further prevented us seeing damage to this extent?
I think the question then is whether the city could have done anything different to prevent the damage to getting to the extent that it is now. So is that the one you can take, Brandon? Yep.
Yeah, that's a question that we have received a couple of times on that, and certainly, we are all saddened by the event of the wall breaking for that, and something that we wish obviously would not have happened. As far as things that we could have done differently, at this point, we don't really know a lot of information about why the wall failed. We want to find out that information. We want to be able to learn from this experience, certainly. When the water comes back down, we will be conducting kind of a review of what actually happened there on that site. It could be as much as the temporary wall failing, could be the ground underneath it, could be something punctured something. At this point, we just don't know. We intend to learn from that and certainly try and work that into future situations.
People that might be coming to the downtown area this weekend, could parking be a concern? And if so, do you have any recommendations for them as they travel? How should they utilize the parking garages? Taking public transit? What kind of recommendations at this point?
Yeah, certainly there are less places to park downtown right now with many of the streets that have water on them at this point. I believe the parking ramps are still open and free, right? They are. Okay, so yeah, so free on-street parking, the 2-hour restrictions are not being enforced, and then also parking in the ramps will be free as well. So we do invite people to come downtown. It is kind of a once-in-a-lifetime view to be able to see what's going on with all the water around here. We fully understand that people want to see what's going on, but be safe as they do that, and obviously park in an appropriate location. Yeah, that series has already been canceled, the Monday series for next week. We'll wait on the decision for the second series that begins on Thursday.
How far over the flood banks is the river and how many people?
I don't know exactly how, at what point in the river where things are. I know that we are about 7.5 feet or so over flood stage for us on that part. And what was the second part of your question?
How many people are businesses?
I couldn't give you an accurate count, but certainly many of the downtown businesses right now are being impacted by the water, even if they're not closed. Many of them are still open, but they have the impacts of just, obviously there's not as much on-street parking available and things like that.
Dave, you mentioned the national declaration. I wanted to know if any of the national delegation was place, and I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to why it actually had more contributions.
The last part of it, I'm sorry, that why.
And then speak a little bit to why a declaration, why resources, why that's resources.
Okay. So I think it's what we're doing to pursue the declaration, our federal delegation. So we have been in contact with our entire federal delegation, Senator Ernst, Senator Grassley, Dave Loebsack, as well as Iowa Homeland Security, Governor Reynolds. They are all working with us at this point. There has been a concerted effort to hold the existing presidential declaration that's in place for Western Iowa open at this point, because causation behind the river flooding here is the same causation behind the river flooding that occurred in Western Iowa. It's excessive snowpack, it's excessive moisture, soil moisture, which led to these conditions. They caused, the timing was different, but much of the same conditions. There were different rain events that triggered some of it as well and contributed to it, so we're trying to make that link, and thus far FEMA has been willing to hold that open for us until such time that we have enough information gathered. We've been sending information daily to the state. That's our process at this point. It's always our process is for a city to work through the county emergency management agency to Iowa Homeland Security Emergency Management Department, and then they work with FEMA and I'm sorry I stole your thunder on the tour. With Governor Reynolds today was a representative from FEMA Region 7 out of Kansas City. And so I think I spoke to a couple of staffers from Homeland Security, and we think we're getting pretty close to gaining that declaration, and we're hopeful, if not today, certainly early next week, we're hopeful that we'll get that. And then I think the other part of the question was why do we need that federal declaration? That federal declaration opens up additional resources. It opens up resources that communities can tap into to help offset some of the costs, whether that be for emergency protective measures, road repairs, infrastructure repairs. It also opens up resources for our residents and our business community, which may be more important to our economic recovery. So I think that presidential declaration is a big driver for our economic recovery here. Without it, that economic recovery would be much slower. There'd be greater impact. Obviously, we're not bringing resources that are offsetting any insured properties. That is a given that if there's insurance in place that will cover the loss, then that's our first option. But it's to, again, assist the community, public assistance, and individual assistance to residents. Hope that answers. Any other question? Yes.
Damage assessment based on floodplain maps and sent to the state.
Mm-hmm.
The number that you know, that is, I know you mentioned that we have found that there's a maximum damage.
Correct. Correct.
What is that?
It's in the tens of millions of dollars of property value. I can't speak to, again, what the actual amount of the damage is. And it was our GIS, our Geographic Information Department, that put all that together for us, and it really comes right out of our tax rolls. But it was a massive number and of dollar value of those impacted properties. But of course, you can't use that number as the actual damage number, because that would assume destruction of all of those properties. I do not have, no, yeah. There's been so much information flowing across my desk. It was brought to me, I glanced at it, looked at it, we looked at it briefly, and it was sent on to the state because, it's been a battle. We've been in a flood fight for the last 3 days and battling to get resources in here, bringing additional pumps. I just haven't had time to really sit down with it and digest the numbers myself, to be quite frank. Yeah.
We've talked to a lot of people in the downtown area, but we actually spoke with residents and people over in our station. One thing that really struck me was they said that they felt forgotten over there. And I just wanted to see kind of what the outreach is over there and, what kind of steps we can help out with the flooding in that area and helping out the residents down there.
Sure.
Yeah, so the question is, what steps is the city taking really to watch out for the garden addition and what's going on there? Certainly that is a part of the town where we have a lot of concern. There is a berm there, and if that berm were to fail, there would be a lot of damage that would be done, certainly by that water. We're fortunate in that we have a ward alderman who here in the room with us today also, but who's very engaged with that portion of town and gives us a lot of feedback as far as what the residents there are experiencing. We continue to have crews down there 24 hours a day, walking that berm, watching what's going on. I've been down there myself every single day, down to that part, and I was just happy that when I went down there a couple hours ago, it was as dry as I had ever seen it in that region. The city certainly is putting a lot of effort into watching that area. It is a problem spot for us, though. That we are going to have situations where the water starts to fill up a little bit, and we have to respond immediately to get that water out. And so it is a disruption to the neighborhood down there, certainly. We hope that the residents down there don't feel forgotten, because certainly we've been, as a city, we've been putting a lot of resources and a lot of time and energy into making sure that neighborhood stays safe. Yeah. Yes. So the question is regarding the closing the gates at the water pollution control plant. So essentially, just so everyone kind of understands a little bit about how that system works, a water pollution control plant is at the end of the last part of a very big pipe, right? That collects all the sewer from this entire system. It brings it down, down to that area. Right now, primarily the water that's in our pipes is river water. And that causes additional pressure in the system, and it, at the end of the day, brings too much water into the water pollution control plant to where it will overrun the system in there. And ultimately, all the equipment, all the property that we have in there, all the machines will not work properly if it gets inundated with water. So we have to control, there's a gate that helps us to control the amount of water that flows into that plant. We lower the gate to control the water. Okay, so right now there's about 8 inches on the gate. That's how far it is open right now. That tells you how much pressure is behind that system pushing it. That's why it's important. We've been working with our partners like the city of Bettendorf, the city of Riverdale, to relieve some of the pressure that's happening in that system, because we know that the more pressure that comes into that plant, it threatens the overall condition of that plant for us. So we lower the gate to reduce the amount of water that flows into the system. At some point, though, the river becomes just too high, and you have to, in order to preserve everything, you just have to completely close the gates and close that off. Not something that we're anticipating doing at this point, but that certainly would then cause a lot more backups down the rest of the system, right? The pressure has to go somewhere in there, and a lot of the system right now is completely underwater as well. So we're watching that part carefully. I don't know if that helped make a little bit more sense out of that system.
The gate is inside the pipe. It's not outside around the plant.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, correct. Yeah, the gate would be stopping the flow from coming into the plant.
In the ground.
Correct, in the ground, yes, yeah, 40 feet down in the ground.
When you were saying about the sanitary sewer, 14 sanitary sewer pipes removing $24 million, can you explain where that is?
So at the,
That is related to
at the
that.
plant
Yeah,
is an 8-foot diameter pipe.
yeah.
Pretty good size. That gate is shutting that flow down. It pushes it back into those pipes. Everybody in both towns is still using the system. So the effluent is going down into the pipes, trying to go to the plant. It can't get to the plant because the plant is only able to process that certain amount. Those lines begin to back up, and we are, in Bettendorf, pumping into the storm system, into the river, to relieve the pressure on the system and allow everybody to continue to use it. Because we're drier than the city is now, and we can pump in locations to be able to remove that and relieve the pressure on the system. And that's what we're doing.
So they don't back up into people's houses.
Correct. And allows us to keep the pressure at the plant at a manageable level to process what we can at the plant and keep that system viable. It's very important that the system stay viable for all of us, because if we lose the plant, that's a huge cost to restart that plant up. So we're providing the mechanism of relieving the pressure, as well as allowing everybody to use the system like they would normally every day. Yeah, we've been at this probably 3 weeks, probably somewhere around 18 feet. There's 2 culprits here, the river water getting in, and then all of the storm water from all the rains. Because those all go into sump pumps. Lots of people have sump pumps in their basements that discharge into the sanitary system, which is what we're trying to get out. So that's a problem. Rain infiltration into some of the lines along the creekways, where all these things follow gravity to the creek, to the river, and then down to the plant. So there's a whole bunch of dynamics that occur with this. So that is the process, right?
How far along the city of Davenport is with getting rid of those connections with sanitary and storm sewer?
So, do you want me to answer?
Sure, if you don't, yeah.
So a significant amount of work has been done by both cities over the last 10 years as part of the consent order that we have with the state DNR. I would tell you, because I think I'm the only person in the room who was here in 1993, we did this very thing in 93 for a very long period of time, and we had backups in Bettendorf along River Drive, as you remember. We have not had any backups to date, and we have not had any backups recently, in the recent last 2 years, I think, And it's a direct result of all the improvements that are being made by the city of Davenport, primarily along the trunk line, and the improvements that we're doing in our lines that we felt had contributed to that flow. So this is a great effort between those of us that belong to the Wastewater Treatment Plant Coalition, the Intergovernmental Agreement. And I would just say this, because Dave didn't say it, and you asked about it, Michelle. I happen to be lucky enough to chair the Quad Cities Local Emergency Planning Council. We're one of the only places in the country where 2 counties and 2 states come together as one entity and do all of the planning for all of the disaster planning and training that we do. The people in that room, those 70, 80, 90 people, have been there the last 5 to 10 years together every month anticipating an event like this. And it's really refreshing to see a robust response from all of our partners in the region who are working together. Today there was a fire chief from Rock Island, the Clinton County EMA manager, all helping as section chiefs to help this process, the Local Emergency Planning Council, and the FEMA process that we're doing. So this incident management is a pretty cool thing to see, and it doesn't happen in very many places in the country, and I'm pretty proud to be a part of it. So we have 24/7, we have guys manning pumps, going around filling all those pumps up, and then we have a couple people that physically walk the dike in Bettendorf, the flood wall, to make sure there's no boils or any activity that would suggest we might have a breach. So we probably have 4 people at any one time actively doing that. And then we have a couple strike teams, and we have a couple of strike team sandbag trucks downtown to move to a location if we needed to do that. And then the CP Rail is manning the 8th and State Street dike with 3 people 24/7. You know, I went there last night at midnight, and they were working, pulling a pump, and they weren't drinking coffee and sitting on their hands. So I'm sure they're tired. Dave?
Are there any other questions? If not, we thank you for attending. Please continue to monitor the City of Davenport website and Facebook page, as well as ScottCountyEMA.com and our Facebook page. We'll continue to post updates and push out public information for the entire community. So thank you very much, and have a good weekend.